Hi, everybody. As they mentioned, my name is Ryan Caven. I'm a senior incident response analyst at the New York Times. And I have a quick presentation regarding incident response, as well as a bit of information and an interactive project where we can all kind of work through a ransomware scenario together. So are you going to be clicking or? Okay. We can go to the next one. Okay. Perfect. So increasingly, it's the case that companies are finding that they need to have a formalized process in place for dealing with incidents and crises as they come up. So we have a PricewaterhouseCoopers. Every year they do a survey of 2,000 businesses. And they found that a lot of companies are dealing with very significant disruptions to their business. This ties in very well with Nuveena's presentation. I don't know if that was planned or not, but in the new age, a lot of companies are learning that they need to have a formalized process for dealing with incidents as they come up. And so more and more companies are spinning up incident response teams whose job it is to proactively develop a process for dealing with issues and resolving them in real time. I would have quoted McKinsey if I knew you were here. I'm sure they have a very similar survey that says about the same thing. So next. So what is an incident response team? So this is a team that is tasked with developing a proactive incident response plan and training the entire organization on exactly how to escalate issues as they come up and how to deal with them in order to minimize the losses associated with a significant cybersecurity incident or technology incident. Broadly, the types of incidents that you can experience will generally fall into two buckets. One, you'll have a typical technology outage. So some inadvertent defect that leads to an outage of key systems or severe degradation in performance. This can be caused by tech debt, a bug in the code, a scaling issue, some kind of issue in your system that that you didn't mean to be there, that's really causing you problems down the road. And then increasingly, we're also seeing cybersecurity incidents, companies dealing with cybersecurity incidents. This is any event that impacts the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of sensitive company information. Usually would be caused by an internal or external adversarial entity. So somebody trying to get your confidential information that really shouldn't have access to it. So any incident response process is going to look different, and any incident that you experience is generally going to, no two incidents are going to look alike. But generally, the response that you take is going to follow a very similar trajectory. You'll start with identifying the process, having some kind of automated or manual process for going through your systems to identify issues as they come up, a process for escalating those issues if you determine that this is a real problem that really needs to be resolved as soon as possible. A coordinated effort for triaging the incident, for spinning up an incident response team and assigning out the relevant tasks and responsibilities to people until you get to a point where you feel confident that we've fully resolved the issue and we feel comfortable to spin it down. We fully contained and recovered our systems, and we can pivot to learning. If anyone's taken a project management course here at TMI, you can kind of think of this as forming, norming, storming, and performing. Everything is fairly analogous to the project management techniques that you learn in the company. I actually started as a project manager and ended up pivoting into incident response, and I found it to be pretty analogous. Next. This is an example of what an incident response team would look like. I pulled this from Google, but the New York Times' incident response team is pretty similar. So usually you'd have an incident commander that would be the analyst like myself, tasked with dealing with the issue. And then you'd have any number of subject matter experts that are relevant and necessary to fixing the problem at hand. So you'll have your communications people who will deal with internal and external communications related to the incident. Your operations lead, this is the real heroes. These would be your technology managers, people like yourself. that have the technical expertise needed to investigate the issue and fully remediate the problem. And then you have your subject matter experts, so anyone from legal, from security and privacy, data forensics, pretty much any additional people that would be necessary to fully investigate the problem and ensure that you're covered. Okay, so what is an incident commander? This is a relatively new concept that a lot of technology organizations have adopted. But broadly speaking, this is the person that'll kind of keep everything on the rails. Fairly analogous, as I had mentioned, to like a project manager. But the time constraints are much more limited. Usually we're trying to deal with incidents within like an 8-hour interval or a 24-hour interval or whatever the incident requires. But they'll track assign and track workflows, ensure a proper flow of information throughout the entire team. So if the legal team requires the investigation and working group to figure out a couple of questions that they need to ensure that we're complying with the relevant laws, the incident commander would be the one funneling that information back and forth. And broadly speaking, it's a lot of blocking and tackling to ensure that the SMEs have everything that they need to really focus on the job at hand and do everything that they need to do. Okay, here's a quick overview of the industries that have been targeted by cybersecurity attacks. I'm going to pivot just to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity in particular. This is a breakdown of the different industries that are that have been targeted by cybersecurity actors. You'll notice at the top 3, business and professional, financial, and healthcare. Largely, it's the case that these cyber actors are financially motivated, and so they'll usually go where the money's at. So financial institutions, it's no surprise that those are the institutions that these cybersecurity actors are hoping to target. And healthcare is also one of the top targeted industries. And it makes a lot of sense because they have a lot of sensitive information, and they'll be very motivated to pay whatever ransom is necessary in order to make the problem go away. Next. Okay, in terms of the methods that these attackers use, 37% of the time, the initial attack vector will be an exploit. So this means that you have a vulnerability in your software or in your environment, and the attackers have developed a way to exploit that vulnerability in order to take advantage of it and insert whatever malicious code it is that they have to carry out their objective. But you will notice that you could be the most secure company in the world and have patched all of the vulnerabilities that you have in your system, and you'll only have dealt with 37% of the possible attack vectors that you could be susceptible to. Increasingly, we're seeing more and more attacks in supply chain compromise. If people are generally aware or familiar with SolarWinds or previous supply chain attacks like that, attackers were able to compromise, I think the number now is about 30,000 different companies just by compromising this one IT software vendor that everybody uses. So we're seeing more and more supply chain compromises and phishing attempts that are leading to very big problems for companies. Okay, this is the process that the attackers will be using, affectionately known as the cybersecurity kill chain. So like incident response, we have a process for dealing with problems. They also generally have a process for completing their mission, whatever it may be. Usually there will be an initial compromise, some vulnerability that they've identified and are able to establish a foothold, at which point they'll escalate privileges and move laterally within your environment. So if they were to say compromise one of your accounts here at NYU, they might find that you don't have a lot of sensitive information, so they're going to try to pivot to Jabril to compromise his access and figure out whatever they're able to do with his information. And they'll continue to do this until they complete their objective. Vast majority of the time financially motivated, but it could be espionage or otherwise. Okay, so that's a quick primer on incident response. I have developed a ransomware scenario. I don't know how we're doing on time. Okay, I'll need everybody's help. I know that Generally, you're probably not ransomware or cybersecurity experts, but for the purposes of this exercise, imagine you're a technology manager or a senior leader and executive at a major company with the goal of developing your company's strategy for dealing with a major ransomware attack. Are people generally aware with ransomware and what it is? Seen it in the news? Okay, so the first task would be developing what company we work for. So does anyone have an idea of what company we want to work for? Who? Yeah, IT technology oriented company. Google? McKinsey? Yeah. Do I do McKinsey? Google? Uber. Okay, yeah, let's do Uber. That'd be fun. Big global company. There's a lot of attack vectors for Uber. So perfect. Let's go into the next slide. Okay, so you are all senior executives at Uber. You wake up one morning and all of your employees are reporting that they're seeing this message on their computer when they open up their laptop. They're unable to access their workstations. Many indicate that they see this ransomware message on their computer, and employees are proceeding to discuss the problem in company-wide Slack channels. And you are all senior executives at this company. What would be your first response? Other than cry, curl up in a ball? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, that is absolutely one of the first things that people will do. They'll try to contain the problem. So first you want to triage the issue, figure out what systems are impacted, and then contain the issue so that it can't spread throughout your environment and get worse and worse. Also, you'll want to build out your team. This is kind of a plug for incident response, but you'll want to make sure that you have all of the right people in place so that you're able to deal with issues as they come up, because there are a lot of complicating factors with ransomware that you'll need to navigate. You'll need your legal team that's able to deal with law enforcement. You'll need your senior leadership team that's able to talk to shareholders, notify vendors, all that kind of stuff. And you'll need communications people that are able to deal with the internal and external communications. Your company is going to be asking a lot of questions. This is Uber. So how quickly do you think it would take for the general public to figure out that you've been attacked by a ransomware issue? Yeah, probably. It's on Twitter now, probably, or X, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You might have a lot of people that are canceling their Ubers immediately. Yeah, absolutely. I imagine that would be one of the subject matter experts that we would want to bring in, somebody who has a high level understanding of strategy. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Okay, perfect. And then as people have mentioned, we're trying to assess the scope. So what systems are down, what kind of data is involved. This is Uber, so I imagine they don't collect people's payments information, but they certainly have a lot of sensitive information related to, or I mean, they subcontract out the payment information, so they personally don't collect their payment information. But they have certainly a lot of sensitive information related to the people. It would be great to know if there's some certain high profile people that use Uber. You could figure out where they go, where they live, patterns of life, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things that you'd have to be concerned about as Uber, if an outside entity had access to all of your data and was able to either lock it in place, to exfiltrate it, and to even dump it onto the internet. Communication channels, what's available? Generally, it sounds like our employees are still able to use Slack. However, we don't necessarily know at this time the full extent of the compromise. So as we're developing our incident response strategy, we probably can't talk about the problem over Slack. We'd probably have to pivot to some out-of-band communication channel, which will create some friction. But it's most likely the case that, our normal email Slack channels are not available to us at this time. Is there anything else that you would want to know in order to formulate a plan? You can go next. 5 minutes? I can do that. Okay. So your cybersecurity team has done a little bit of digging. This is Inject 2. Your cybersecurity team presents known facts and threat intelligence regarding the ransomware entity that has compromised your systems. Based off the message, they're able to identify the attacker as Wizard Spider Fin 12. They always have these really fun names. Spider means they're an e-criminal entity. But usually it'll give you a little bit of information as to what they want. In this case, you're able to confirm that they're purely financially motivated, they're highly sophisticated, and they have a great track record of making companies pay ransoms. And based off their average time to ransom, they probably infiltrated your systems about 12 days ago. So let's say that you didn't want to pay the ransom. What would you need to know? They've encrypted your software. Maybe somewhere on Google, we have an incredible cryptographer that's able to decrypt it. Maybe. I'm seeing no. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think if you were to ask any cryptographer, it's like you're looking at a minimum of 200 years to decrypt. And I imagine you also want to figure out what communications you want to draft. So we can actually go to the next one. So yeah, we're going to want to figure out if we can decrypt. Alternatively, it's possible that we maybe have a master backup or an image that we can use to restore our systems without paying the ransom. So let's say you as a leader, senior leadership, you task your engineering team with figuring out how long is it going to take for us as a company to get back without paying the ransom if we were to restore from a backup. Similar to like if you had an iPhone and lost it, you might be able to buy a new iPhone and restore from a saved backup in the cloud. And then also your employees are asking a lot of questions and external stakeholders are asking a lot of questions. So it's likely that you're going to want to, at this point, draft as many communications as possible to be able to field all the questions that are coming in. Okay, so your working group comes back and they tell you, as you suspected, they're unable to decrypt. It would take far too long and we don't have that much time. If we wanted to restore from backup, we could do it within 15 business days and be back up and running in 15 days. And news organizations are reaching out for additional information. So at this point, you've reached out to law enforcement. They're going to give you general guidance for how to deal with this part of the process. They have hardline legal requirements that they would require you to make, but the decision is yours as to whether or not you want to pay the ransom. So what are some of the considerations? I put some hints up here, but you have some ethical considerations that you would need to consider, some legal considerations that you would want to consider, and then your financial considerations. But yes. Yeah, most companies and likely Uber has a cybersecurity insurance policy that would certainly be triggered in this instance. And so it's likely that we could, through our insurer, pay the ransom out of our cybersecurity insurance policy. But we don't have an insurance that will cover everything. Exactly. Yeah. So if we pay the ransom, we would need to know that this company, whoever they are, would not then do a secondary attack on us, because if they were to exfiltrate our data, there's nothing preventing them from taking that data and dumping it on the internet the day after we pay them. So how would you build confidence in a threat actor like this? Ironically, these organizations kind of work on they work on their street credibility. And so you can actually work with third-party vendors to understand their historical record. So you would be able to work with these companies to know, do they just decrypt or do they also decrypt and exfiltrate our data? If we pay, what's their history of going away? So ironically, their street cred is anything. And if they were to ruin their street cred, no companies would pay because they wouldn't have confidence in them. So ironically, there is a level of confidence that you can get. It's a risky bet, but there's ironically some level of confidence you can get in these actors. Yeah. Um, I would, I would, I would say that you're probably at more risk. Yeah, these entities are pretty capable and able to identify like open endpoints in the cloud. And so if you're not properly protecting all of your, your massive cloud infrastructure, if there's just one system that doesn't have the right, permissioning in place, then that can be an easy vector for them to get in. So it actually can kind of open you up to a wider attack surface if you're in the cloud. Yeah. No, yeah, that would be another ball game. Their motivations would be very different. There's probably less that we would be able to do if this happened to be a nation state actor. Um, in all likelihood, if it was a nation state actor, they wouldn't be asking for money. They would be looking to inflict as much damage as possible. So there really wouldn't be too much to do at this point. Yeah. So I think we're close to the end. So I'll just open up the question to everybody. What would you do? Would you decide to pay the ransom, or do you think that Uber should not pay, should eat the cost of 15 days of downtime? I don't know how many millions that would be, some absurd number probably. Yes. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This would be a boon to Lyft. Yeah, exactly. So if the ransomware entity is demanding $15 million, and you know that your downtime, if you were down for 15 days, is going to be way more than $15 million, that cost benefit analysis will lead you towards paying the ransom. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have no guarantee as to what they're going to do after you pay. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would only add, yeah, exactly. They have a street cred to maintain, so you can actually look at their history and see what they've done in the past. And if it actually was the case that they have a reputation for not holding up their end of the bargain, then they, as a ransomware group, would likely die because no company would be willing to pay them in the future because they would know that they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So, ironically, their street cred does open up some weird um, avenues where you can kind of trust a little bit of what they're telling you. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Some of them, it really varies. There's a group of people that really just want to watch the world burn. That's kind of their general modus operandi. But there are, in certain parts of the world, a very formalized economy around ransomware. You have, it's called RAS, ransomware as a service, similar to SaaS, software as a service. You pretty much do not need any technical experience whatsoever. You can rely on these RAS companies and kind of outsource a lot of the um, tech, yeah, the back end where the admin, no one wants to do admin. So even without technical experience, you can, take advantage of this very formalized economy. And for the most part, from a criminology point of view, I'd say that their motivations are a lot of people are very financially motivated and view this as a good job opportunity within their circumstances. Yeah. 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 I mean, okay. So imagine all of you have probably received some kind of phishing email in the past, and it's usually pretty easy to spot the phishing emails. There's poor grammar, very terrible spelling. It's not personalized to you. And these LLMs will make it infinitely easier for these groups to develop highly personalized and very difficult to detect phishing emails that would be very, very difficult to catch and to identify, especially for your more casual employees. So it makes it infinitely more important to have, good phishing hygiene, to have, detection systems that kind of see as phishing attempts are coming into your Gmail environment or Microsoft environment, whatever it may be. But yeah, no, the future, it's going to be very, very difficult because they can make highly personalized phishing messages that are going to, I've seen a couple of them at this point, and they would get me for sure. It's a lot of, they if they learn enough about you, they can find something that'll make you click, and that's really all they need to do. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Uh, Hi, Tess. Thanks for Ryan's speech. So let's welcome to our next speaker, Jack Bell. He's from Polygon Ion. It's a dynamic platform revolutionizing the way developer access the financial market data. So let's welcome him.
Thank you. As previously stated, my name is Jack, and I represent Polygon.io. We are a financial market data platform, so we provide all kinds of financial securities underlying data. So the current asset classes that we support are equities, which is where we started, U.S. equity options, cryptocurrency, Forex, and global indices. So one of the main things that we believe at Polygon is that the future of financial application and just general products, the innovation of those depends on developers, quants, and software engineers to have modern tools and resources to actually build upon to further innovate. So we are excited to partner with all kinds of academia and small companies. We've partnered with Tandon, both on a high level of the I think it's the financial engineering courses here to provide transaction level trade and quote data for financial modeling, back testing of strategies, but also courses that are just introductions to programming via just something like Python. Because we pride ourselves in providing very easy to use and intuitive APIs, whether that be RESTful APIs or WebSockets for streaming. we have these introductory courses wanting to come to us just as a way to, get them involved in, a cool use case to actually play around and kind of hone their skills, while just getting up to speed with programming. So as a bit of a background, many of the incumbent data providers that have been around for a while are, what you could consider to be a bit monopolistic. They have very antiquated connectivity methods, uncertain or preposterous licensing structures and restrictions. So when you get into, if you just had a passion project that you wanted to actually, go in and, build the next Robinhood, it would be extremely hard for you to actually do so. So we have gone about trying to, modernize that with the platform that we've created. So that's, again, is kind of more of what I was speaking to. If you want to go one more. So again, the process of actually ingesting the data from all these different venues is pretty complex. We try to make it as easy as possible for the end user to just be able to connect, not even think about where it comes from, because it's actually highly convoluted and kind of a headache when you really get into it. But just to give you a sense of how much data we're dealing with on a daily basis, for US equity options, if you guys are familiar or if you guys trade at all, in order for us to actually consume all of the trades, and it's primarily the quotes, that's the bulk of the data size, we see 15 terabytes of compressed data coming through what they call the tapes, which is all the exchange feeds, which eventually flow down to Polygon, which we have to process daily, store, package up, and then be able to query and fetch within that data set, just one contract's individual trade. So it is a bit like searching for a needle in a haystack when you get down to the vast amount of data that we even store for 20 years. So it is a ton, but we do it for you guys. I don't want to go too in depth here because this is like a whole topic, and a lot of like where the complexity comes from. But just to give you an idea of the equities US market data infrastructure currently, there are 19 different stock exchanges. It's not just NYSE or NASDAQ. They both actually have 4 individual operating exchanges who are governed by 2 other entities called the Consolidated Tape Association and Unlisted Trading Privileges. So every single exchange reports to CTA and UTP for either NYSE or NASDAQ, respectively. So there's also FINRA, who's another operating committee that does all of like the market making, dark pool, again, kind of really far into the weeds of it. But what Polygon does is we consolidate all of the consolidation as well as individual proprietary exchange feeds based on the licensing structures that we dig into that are most optimal for specific use cases, like whether you want to display data publicly, which is astonishingly very hard and expensive. So what we do is we take down all the data, go to each exchange to then consume whichever one is the best, and then package that up into products that are the same really for whether you're JP Morgan or just Johnny Appleseed that wants to come down and build the next JP Morgan, for instance. So some of our partners, the listing exchanges, NASDAQ, we were actually here last September when we launched one of their new data feed products. And this is just a picture from the Times Square little marketing thing that they did for us. So super thankful for NASDAQ. Similarly with SIBO, we package up some of their products and data feeds to revend them to people that are servicing financial display applications, and they let us ring the bell. So we have a very wide net of customers, being that we're just a platform. So whether it's just you wanting to implement a strategy into, however you're programmatically trading and you want to back test that on our historical data, we primarily, and a lot of our wheelhouse is the just financial application and display. So a well-known instance is the Motley Fool. They're they use us to graph these charts and provide some of the reference and financials data that you would see when just going to the Apple screen or any of the 6,000 listed companies. Go to the next one. Another typical use case that we see is the retail brokerage or neo brokerage. So during the pandemic, we saw a huge uptick in retail participants in international markets, which is really cool to see. Really, it gives us confidence in our market here that many applications are coming to the U.S. to integrate with our market and let their citizens invest in our markets directly. Public.com is not necessarily an example of that, but they're one of our bigger customers that you just may be familiar with, who do the same thing. They source, retrieve, consume, and display all of our data onto their application. Another one, Stash, they're one that's native to, I think, the South, actually, which our company's based in Atlanta. But another brokerage investing application like wealth management that does very, similar stuff. Sife is actually one of the companies out in APAC that is doing the same neo retail brokerage from Singapore and allowing them to invest in the US market. And Revolut is the same thing. They are based out in Europe. They're actually one of our largest customers by request volume. It's an interesting anecdote. They are hitting our APIs upwards of 500 million times a month. So there's a high level of load just coming from them, because every single time you open the Revolut app and look at Apple, it's individually requesting for, say, like our aggregates endpoint, which provides the open, high, low, close across whatever time frame they're looking at, whether it be just 1 day, 1 hour, 5 days, whatever it might be, or all. Go Trades out in Indonesia. So another neo brokerage use case, which we see enabling the US investments from an international market. Again, and some of our bigger clients, just to showcase them, are the large institutions, which, the banks and whatnot. This is an interesting application where it's because of the granularity of the data that we provide, we see people building either, simple interfaces like what you would see on a Robinhood, or, the more, I guess, complicated volatility surfaces based on, whatever Greek calculations or financial modeling. I can't even speak to it that well over my head, but you guys might have seen this before. Go next. So we highlight the big guys. One that I like to kind of brag about sometimes is Wall Street Bets. If you're familiar with them, or the meme stock community, their bots are actually plugged into our APIs to scan for people just shilling micro cap companies that maybe don't reach whatever their threshold is for market cap. So anytime someone says, "Hey, buy this random stock," pulls our service, checks the price, the market cap to make sure it hits that threshold. And if it doesn't, it's just removed as potentially spam, or I'm not really sure what they call it. This is an interesting, I don't know if you probably can't see it too well from back there, but this is the typical response object from our trades endpoint. So, back to 2004, this specific ETF for the whole month of, I think this is like July of 2004, was trading around the 100 to the 110 range. And given the granularity of our service, we can see each individual transaction. And the one that's highlighted here is a trade that was executed at 10,973 for a size of 35,000 shares. So whether that is a decimal error on whoever placed that order, it was in the actual tape, so it's not even like an error. We spent a lot of time validating that. But whoever, I guess, made this trade, if it was a decimal error and not some just like weird transaction issue within the exchange, it was a $380 million mistake. So you don't see that very often. It's just kind of a bit of the granularity of our data, and want to showcase that. But I didn't provide any I guess demo of the docs or the actual API in here. But if any of you guys would like to poke around with it, if you have strategies that you may be thinking about implementing, or the next idea for an application, feel free to sign up and let me know. I gave you free access and just to tinker around or whatever it may be. Again, we're happy to provide access to the future of financial innovation. So that's all I really had for you guys today. If you have any questions, happy to answer, or you can pull me aside after. Yeah, that's a great question. We did kind of pioneer the flexible API side of market data access. A lot of it prior was either like the fixed protocol or just straight up like FTP like dumps into S3 or Google Cloud, whatever it would be. So all our founder and like our CTO, they all have pure like engineering. They come from Google and Amazon. So them starting out on the project wanting to find a source for this data was kind of the genesis behind creating flexible APIs that can be integrated in like many different I guess facets of an application or strategy. Then the other side of it is the actual productizing, like what exchanges we go to based on their policies to make sure it's most advantageous for the end user. So that it can be very challenging because a lot of them are very rooted in the incumbents, and oftentimes it is almost more expensive to switch than it would be to just stick with one of those legacies. But where we've seen a lot of success is actually having say just John Smith, who's an individual that's got a personal license that is just building an application, who goes to market with this app, and it actually takes off and explodes, and they see a lot of growth very fast. So while we have switched over some of those larger players, a lot of them are like maybe greenfield projects where they test it out and maybe use it in some piece of an application before switching it all over completely for whatever cost savings or optimizations they're able to do with the features we can provide. It's not typically like an all-encompassing switch at first. Awesome, thank you. Well, that's great feedback, and I love to hear it. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And now we are going to welcome our next speaker from Fey Lab. It's an innovative research tool designed to strike a unique balance between affordable and high quality information.
Hi, I'm Matthew Knipfa. Actually, it's awesome that Jack is here because we're one of the companies that use Polygon. Polygon is awesome. I can't recommend them enough. They undergird like most of our company. So Fey Labs, we make a tool. It's Fey. I mean, not too surprising based on the name. And has anyone here ever used a Bloomberg terminal? Like if you have used a Bloomberg terminal, like go ahead and raise your hand. Have used a Bloomberg terminal. No one actually? Interesting. Okay. So Bloomberg terminal is the industry standard, like in the finance industry, for where you get like financial market information. It's got, you know, all the stocks you need, fixed income options, everything like that. It's super robust and it's insanely expensive. For one workstation of a Bloomberg terminal, it's $27,000 a year. And that's going to be the 6-monitor setup. You know, you're sitting in the matrix there at your office and you're trading like millions of dollars. So like you kind of sneeze at $27,000 annually. It's not too big of a deal. But what if you're a student? Like what if you're university and you're trying to train, you know, 2,000 finance students or maybe like 500 in your finance department? Well, Bloomberg does have favorable financing for like academics. You know, you can get like 12 seats for notably cheaper. Essentially, the cost of 3 gets you 12. At the end of the day, though, like servicing a class of 30 students is well over $100,000 annually. And then you need to have the classes that come through. And then like, how do you do homework on that when you've got like, I see the now right there. So you end up with this challenge of like, how do you give access to like a lot of markets data to all these students so they can just like do their homework on a regular basis? I mean, currently what we've seen is that a lot of classes don't actually include live markets. You use sort of like dead data, you use like previous stuff before, and your financial information gets out of date. And part of the interesting thing about doing finance is like you get to see like, oh, here is the most recent financial report. So a typical challenge that, you know, I got to see when I was going through school was like, you know, you're in your 1,000 or 2,000 level financial management course. You get a few weeks in, maybe halfway through the semester, and the professor says, all right, we're gonna do a group project. Go ahead and split up into groups, pick a company and do a report on it. And you all split up and there's maybe like, you know, 5 groups. And he's like, all right, which company did you pick? And the first one that always goes at any sort of private university I've gone to, it's always Lululemon. And then half the class grumbles, like, oh no, that was my company. And then the professor goes to the next one, what's your company? And they might say Apple, you know, that one's always up there. But somewhere in that chain, someone's company was already taken and they go scramble to find a new company. And they go find just the most, you know, 15C2-11 caveat emptor, like dark defunct security. They go find it on Reddit in like 30 seconds. And then they go home to do their project. And that night the professor gets an email and it's like, hey, turns out there wasn't any information on my company on Yahoo Finance. Can I get a new one? And then they get another email for that like same thing. And it happens across like the 5 classes that they teach, all the 5 different sections. And then even once they've gotten the company sorted out, the students need to go actually do their homework. So what do? They get out of class, they go to like the local coffee shop on campus. They're doing work there. And the work that they do is the work that they can do because they have their textbooks or they have all the information they need. And they always put off going over to the Bloomberg lab and logging on. And then it gets like, you know, 5 or 6 p.m. And friends are like, hey, you want to go get dinner? And then they go do that. And they're like, oh, I'll go to the Bloomberg lab at like 8 or 9 p.m. And it gets like 8 or 9. And the friends want to hang out later. And then eventually they go to bed and they're like, oh, I'll wake up early and go to the lab. They never go to the lab. And the professor once again gets like 10 extension requests. So, you know, these schools are paying well into the 6 figures. And ultimately, a lot of the students aren't actually using any of that. So, you know, we're providing actually a research interface that is admittedly not as robust as Bloomberg, but it's 1% the cost. You can install it on any student's device. It does have global markets. It's got robust financial data sheets. And you know, honestly, you can just tell the students that they got to do their homework. Like, no more excuses. And from the student's perspective, it's really enjoyable because now you actually get to look at like global markets live. So I'm just going to poke around the interface a little bit. Like, we've got the home screen here, GM, we can go to global markets there. All of this is keyboard shortcut accessible. It'll teach you if you hover over it. We got news, so go news. We can pull up a specific stock. So let's go ahead and pull up like Lululemon, for example. We've got all of that. We can cycle through the pricing. And the coolest part is financials right there. So we can pull up like quarterly financials, annual. We can cycle through the income statement, the balance sheet, cash flow. We can search for export if you'd like to get historical financials, historical prices. And then also, one of the cool things is that we actually have an AI tool. So reading a 10Q is not particularly fun, but they're really meaningful. And if you can just get an overview before you even get into the 10Q, it actually really helps with comprehending the document thereafter. So we actually built a tool for summarizing 10Qs. We're going to be expanding it to 10Ks. And we've actually had quite a few private equity firms reach out to us wanting us to expand it to things like including conference calls, any other SEC filing, any other report like that. And also, if you want to go, pull up the SEC document, we've got it right there. So all of this it was originally intended for retail. It was actually intended for traders originally. And I was the one who sort of really pushed the company to extend this to academia because I remembered my own experience having a few financial courses and the fact that my school had one Bloomberg terminal and it's kind of like one is none. And some schools also pay for Capital IQ. Once again, that's like a $27,000 cost. That one's at least accessible. You can go log on that on your own computer. But once again, when I actually will go to these schools and I'll ask them, what are you making use of? Like, you're paying all this money. How much are you using it? And a lot of them don't even make use of that. So for some schools, depending on the size, we're able to help a school that really wasn't using any of the financial stack they were paying for, save, $250,000 over a few years and give every student access to financial markets on their own device. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, actually, one thing I forgot. I went ahead and messaged our engineer during the other presentations. All NYU.edu addresses do have free access through the rest of the year. So if you would like to actually go, I see the excitement. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so if you want to go download it right after the presentation, feel free to do so. Give it a shot. And you can actually email me directly. It's just matthew@feyapp.com. I should actually show the address there. So feyapp.com. Sign up, use your EDU address, you'll get free access. And then, yeah, just matthew@feyapp.com. Send me any requests, any feedback. We are just I love how excited you are right now. Yeah, we're working with a lot of schools right now, and it's a long cycle before budgets make decisions. And there's just so much that we're happy to build. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for the free trial. And